I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension. Cue the truth. Let's get into it. When a stranger leans in and tells you your spouse is cheating, the first mistake is deciding, right there, whether the stranger is lying. The better question is this: what has your partner been training you not to notice? In this story, the real warning signs were not perfume on a collar or lipstick on a glass. It was urgency around shared money, a new tenderness that felt performed, and a spouse who suddenly needed privacy in every room. When betrayal comes dressed in charm, do not rush toward drama. Slow down long enough to see the pattern. The first time Nia Holloway spoke to me, there was a jazz trio warming up under a chandelier that looked like dripping ice, and my wife was across the ballroom laughing too hard at something a chef had said. It was a last Friday in November, cold enough that Baltimore felt made of iron. I was standing near the coat check in Hotel Indigo, holding 2 champagne flutes I had not wanted, when a stunning woman in a camel coat stepped beside me and whispered, "Your wife slept with my husband. Let's take revenge together." Then she kept looking straight ahead, as if she had merely commented on the weather. I did not answer at first. I remember the violin from the trio squeaking once, badly, and someone behind us asking for another shrimp toast. My wife, Danielle, was in an emerald dress I had paid to have altered that week. She had told me this museum donor party mattered to her career, and I had put on a navy suit and smiled through conversations about donor cultivation and board politics because that is what marriage had meant to me for 11 years. Beside me, the woman did not fidget. She had deep brown skin, a narrow gold ring, and eyes that looked too rested for somebody making a claim like that. If that opening just caught you off guard, stay with this one, because this is not just a cheating wife revenge story. It turns into a slow, emotional betrayal drama about lies, stolen money, and the moment 2 broken spouses decide to fight back with proof. And before we go deeper, like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful relationship drama, and subscribe for more original stories like this. "I think you have the wrong man," I said. She finally turned her head. "I do not." Her voice was low, careful, almost gentle. She handed me a business card. Nia Holloway. Holloway Procurement Consulting. The cardstock was thick and soft. "My husband is Xavier Holloway. He is the guest chef your wife will pretend she only knows professionally. If you leave with her tonight, she will kiss you in the car and ask whether you enjoyed yourself. Tomorrow morning, she will say she has a site visit in Station North. She will not." She paused. "Meet me before you decide I am crazy." I watched her walk away before I looked at my wife again. Danielle was one of those women who took up light. She did not have to be the loudest person in the room, because attention leaned toward her anyway. That night, she leaned close to Xavier near the auction table, one hand grazing his sleeve like it belonged there. He was broad-shouldered, clean beard, white dinner jacket, a man built for open kitchens and donor photographs. I told myself I was misreading a simple touch. I told myself black professionals in small city circles cross paths all the time. I told myself plenty, because denial can sound exactly like reason when your house is still standing. Danielle drove home with her heels off, one foot tucked under her, radio low. She smelled like bergamot and cold air. "Did you survive?" she asked, smiling. "I know those people are not exactly your crowd. They pay for your projects," I said. "They do." She laughed softly and put her hand on my thigh at a red light. "Thank you for showing up." It would have been easier if she had been distant, cruel even, but she was warm in the car, warm in the kitchen while she rinsed off lipstick, warm climbing into bed. I lay awake beside her listening to the row house radiator knock and try and convince myself that a stranger had merely dropped poison in my ear. I could have thrown Nia's card in the trash with the grocery receipt and the dry cleaning tag. I almost did. The next morning, Danielle stood at the stove making cinnamon oatmeal, humming an old Anita Baker song under her breath. Our marriage had habits that made it feel permanent. First Saturday waffles, late-night crossword puzzles, Sunday calls with my aunt in Randallstown, the little brass bell over the door of my frame shop, Reed and Grain, that Danielle said sounded like a bicycle in a dream. People do not like to admit how much love is routine. Routine is what makes lies hard to see. Routine keeps setting the table for them. Then Danielle carried her phone into the shower. That was new. So was the face-down placement at breakfast, the quick turn of the screen when I came near, and the little sigh she gave when a message arrived, as if life had become full of private burdens she was nobly carrying. At 9:43, while she was upstairs blow-dry her hair, I took Nia's card from the trash and smoothed a coffee stain off the corner. I called from the back room of my shop, where framed graduation portraits leaned against the wall, and my father's dented trumpet sat above the mat cutter. Nia answered on the second ring and said, Penn Station Diner, 1 o'clock. The diner sat a block from the train station, narrow and bright, with steamed-up windows and a waitress who called everyone honey without sounding false. Nia was already in a booth with a legal pad, a tea she had not touched, and a stack of printed pages in a blue folder. In daylight, she was even more striking, not because she was glamorous, though she was, but because she looked arranged from the inside out. Her coat was folded neatly beside her. Her nails were short. She had the kind of composure that made my own silence feel messy. I am sorry, she said before sliding the folder over. You needed proof, not theatrics. The first page was a photo of Danielle and Xavier outside a restaurant supply warehouse in Highlandtown. Not kissing. Worse. Comfortable. Her hand hooked through his elbow like that gesture had been practiced. The second page was a hotel receipt from Harbor East with Xavier's name and the kind of room charge that suggested afternoon confidence. Then came screenshots of text from an iPad Xavier had forgotten was still syncing to a family laptop. She misses details because she thinks he is simple. That line sat on the paper, like a thumb pressed into my chest. I did not have to ask who he was. Nia did not rush me. She let me read until the letters started blurring. Then she said, I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust documents. I looked up. Why come to me like that? Because I was angry, she said. And because if I opened with spreadsheets, you would have thought I was selling insurance. That almost made me smile, but it stopped halfway. How long? 6 months that I can prove. Maybe longer emotionally. The money part started 4 months ago. The money part? She nodded. That is the part that concerns me most. I had known Danielle since we were both 26 and still believed ambition and decency were naturally compatible. We met in line at a carryout on Greenmount after church choir rehearsal, arguing about whether sweet potato pie should be served warm. She liked rooms with lots of glass and fresh flowers. She ironed pillowcases. She could charm old men, trustees, little children, and women who would enter a room already prepared not to like her. I was slower, more cautious, a man who measured before cutting both wood and conversation. Reed and grain had come from my uncle's shop and my own stubbornness. I framed other people's milestones for a living and thought that counted as useful. Nia's husband, Xavier, had a different kind of talent. He could look at you as if your attention were a prize he had just won. He had worked his way up through kitchens in D.C. and Philadelphia before coming back to Maryland to open his own place. He talked in big nouns, vision, concept, legacy, footprint. Danielle met him during a museum planning dinner, where he catered braised short ribs and charred okra over cheddar grits. They recognized each other immediately. Nia said, and I knew what she meant, some people can smell admiration on each other before the food arrives. This is the part one almost missed, Nia said, turning to another section of the folder. My husband started billing a consulting company for design work and equipment scouting, Hollow Table Consulting. It sounded invented because it was, the payments are connected to your household accounts. I stared at the statements. $3,000, $4,800, $7,200. Memo lines reading renovation transfer or vendor hold. Numbers I had seen without seeing, because Danielle and I had been moving money around for a shared project. We had planned to convert the carriage house behind our row home into a youth art room and weekend workshop space. Some of that money came from the small inheritance my mother left me when she died. He used your dream to finance his, Nia said. I hated that she was the one who had to say it. My mother had kept cash in a blue ceramic cookie jar, labeled flour in thick black letters. She believed every family needed one place where hope stayed physical. When she passed, I sold the jar of the house, but kept the principal. The money in that renovation account was not just numbers to me. It was Saturdays teaching kids to stretch canvas, neighborhood exhibits, a place my father would have called clean work. Danielle knew that. She had sat with me at the dining table and sketched where the work tables would go. 15. I could have gone home from that diner and confronted Danielle before she got back from her office at the museum. I could have dumped the folder onto our dining table and asked her which part she wanted to lie about first. Instead, I put the papers in a banker's envelope and slid them under the false bottom of my supply cabinet at the shop. I chose it because anger would have made me loud, and loud men become easy to blame. Danielle was polished, persuasive, and already preparing small stories about my supposed distance. I needed more truth than she had rehearsed excuses. After that, my whole life became a room where I noticed sounds I'd been ignoring. Danielle's soft laugh at texts she never shared. The way she started putting on lipstick before committee calls. The extra blowout appointment before a Tuesday vendor walkthrough. At night, she slept curled away from me, one hand tucked under the pillow, phone charging on the floor, within reach. During the day, I cut mats for family portraits, shadowbox church fans, and listened to old men in the barbershop next door argue about the Orioles, while shame sat in my stomach like a stone I had swallowed whole. Nia, and I met every few days after that. Sometimes at the diner, sometimes in the back pews of a church on North Avenue during weekday lunch hour, when nobody was there but a sexton polishing brass. Once at Lexington Market, standing with paper boats of crab cake and pickles, because she said grief should not make us stop eating. She was a contract consultant by trade, the person companies hired when their paperwork started bleeding. She spoke in careful layers. She tapped 2 fingertips against her coffee cup before asking hard questions. Her anger was not theatrical. It had edges and invoices attached. She told me Xavier had used her name on a personal guarantee for restaurant equipment, not a forged scrawl on a napkin, a real signature copied onto legal documents, supported by email trails where Danielle referred vendors to our finance person, meaning Nia, without her permission. He needed my credit and your wife's appetite, Nia said. That combination got him farther than talent alone. Did you love him? I asked before I could stop myself. She looked at the church floor for a second, enough to miss who he was becoming. That is not the same thing as not seeing it. I understood that better than I wanted to. 3 Tuesdays later, sleet needled the sidewalks, and I followed Danielle after work. I hated myself for doing it and hated myself more for needing to. She told me she had a donor call in Mount Vernon. Instead, she parked near a half-finished restaurant in Station North, a former bank with tall windows papered over from the inside. Xavier met her at the side entrance, carrying a box of brass light fixtures. He set it down. She brushed sleet from his coat collar. Then she pressed her forehead to his for one suspended second that felt intimate in a way kissing almost never does. I sat in my truck with the heater, clicking, and watched them disappear inside. A mural across the street had half a trumpet painted on it, blue and gold, and rain made the color run. I could have gotten out then. I could have walked into that building and let my heartbreak choose a language. Instead, I took photos of the delivery truck, the vendor logo on the boxes, the permit notice in a window, and Xavier's hand at the small of Danielle's back. I chose not to make a scene because public humiliation can blur facts. I wanted consequence, not chaos. They had been chaotic enough for all 4 of us. That night, Danielle brought home lemon cake from the bakery on Harford Road and asked whether I had mailed the holiday cards. There's a strange violence in ordinary questions asked by someone who is stealing from you. I watched her cut the cake with our wedding registry knife and wonder how a person keeps so many cells lined up without tripping over them. She talked about museum donors, a trustee's difficult wife, the absurd cost of peonies in winter. I said very little because if I started, I was afraid I would ask whether Xavier preferred her laugh in the daylight or dark. The next Sunday, Mr. Leon at the barbershop next to my store asked me why I had been letting my beard go crooked. He was 72 kept a chessboard open by the register, and believed every serious life problem could be diagnosed by how a man sat in a chair. I told him business had been heavy. He snorted. "A lie hates a calendar, Malcolm. Put days next to what feels off. The dates will tell people." That sounded like something old black men had known forever, and young hurt men had to relearn at full price. I went back to the shop and made a timeline. Once I started writing it down, the shape of the thing came clear. Danielle's sudden push to move faster on the carriage house. Her insistence that we increase our home equity line, because money sitting still is wasteful. The week Xavier announced his concept dinner series, and Danielle came home floating, saying the city was finally rewarding bold people. The month she started criticizing my caution, as if steadiness were a personality defect, instead of the reason our mortgage had never been late. Shame turned into anger slowly, then into something cleaner. I had not been foolish. I had been faithful. Nia and I divided the work without discussing it much. She traced contracts, vendor emails, permit filings, and the equipment lease with her forged signature. I gathered bank records, renovation transfers, museum reimbursement requests Danielle had sent herself, and proof that materials supposedly bought for our carriage house had instead been delivered to Xavier's address or restaurant site. We used legal channels where we could and quiet observation where we had to. Neither of us wanted to become what had hurt us. That mattered. Once betrayal enters a room, it invites imitation. We were trying not to let it move into our bones. Around Christmas, Danielle changed tactics. Instead of distance, she became careful sweetness. She made collard greens on a Wednesday for no reason. She rubbed my shoulders while I worked on invoices. She suggested we spend New Year's in a cabin near Deep Creek, just the two of us to reset. I almost let myself enjoy it. That was the ugly part. Betrayed people are not always noble. Sometimes we are hungry enough to be fooled twice if the performance is tender. But then I found a printed menu concept in her tote bag, where her handwriting in the margin, "Tell investors Malcolm money secured/no issue." When I showed Nia, her mouth tightened but she did not swear. "They are pitching with our stability," she said. "Your marriage, my credit, that is what they are selling. What does revenge look like to you, really?" She held my gaze for a long moment. Not sleeping with each other, not breaking windows, not ruining our names trying to ruin theirs. To me, revenge looks like removing every cushion they thought would soften the fall. That answer steadied me more than anything else she had said. Clarity has its own beauty. I think that was the first moment I trusted her beyond paperwork. In January, Nia made a choice that could have gone differently. She could have taken her forgery evidence straight to a prosecutor that week. She had enough to start a headache, maybe more. Instead, she filed civil notices first and worked to freeze the personal guarantee before the equipment company could go after her or the restaurant staff they were hiring. "I will not let the dishwasher and line cooks get crushed because two selfish people decided they were visionaries," she said. That told me everything about her. Hurt had not hollowed out her ethics. It had sharpened them. My own second choice came with my sister Rochelle. She noticed I had stopped eating properly and kept asking why I looked like a man who had forgotten his own front door. I almost told her everything over catfish and cabbage at my aunt's house on New Year's Day. I did not, because Rochelle was in the middle of IVF and carrying enough hope and fear already. I chose silence and not to protect Danielle, but to protect somebody I love from becoming my witness too early. Sometimes withholding the story is not denial. Sometimes it is mercy. By February, Danielle and Xavier were moving fast. Their investor preview for the restaurant, Copperfig, was scheduled for early March. Nia obtained a budget deck through a vendor thread. The projected opening costs included owner capital, partly built from funds that were, in plain language, my mother's money and Nia's good name. Danielle's role was styled as strategic partnerships advisor. Xavier called himself founding chef and creative principal, which sounded expensive and vague. There were watercolor renderings, moody light studies, and menu descriptions that read like declarations of statehood. Betrayal loves a mood board. It helps it feel like destiny instead of theft. I started noticing how much Danielle needed an audience. She did not want wealth quietly. She wanted admiration attached to it. At church, she volunteered to read announcements, so people would see her pearls and hear her voice. At museum functions, she touched elbows, remembered anniversaries, sent thank you notes on thick cream paper. She was not fake in a simple way. She had real generosity in her, which made the rest worse. She took flowers to sick women. She also siphoned our future into a man's vanity project and slept beside me as if fidelity were just one more room she could stage. One snowy evening, she sat cross-legged on the bed in one of my old college sweatshirts and asked, "Do you still think about children?" The question hit me so hard, I almost laughed. We had gone back and forth on that for years, mostly because the timing was never right and grief kept interrupting our plans. "Sometimes," I said. She nodded, eyes soft. "I do too." Later that night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the bathroom with both hands on the sink and realized betrayal is not always the affair itself. Sometimes it is a shameless use of old shared dreams as tools. Nia found the piece we had been missing 2 weeks before the preview, a spreadsheet Xavier had accidentally sent from Danielle's email to a cabinet maker. It showed planned transfers, investor targets, and note beside one large amount. Move after preview/tell spouses after wire lands. My name was not written there, but it did not need to be. Neither did hers. We were spouses in a plan that treated us like timing issues. When she forwarded it to me, I sat at the workbench in the back of Reed and Grain and stared at the screen until the bell over the front door rang twice unanswered. Our plan came together the same way a frame does: measure, cut, test, secure. Nia's attorney prepared emergency filings tied to the forged guarantee and misrepresented ownership structure. My lawyer drew up divorce papers, a motion to protect our renovation funds, and notice challenging Danielle's claims to business assets touched by her misconduct. We also contacted 2 investors privately and gave them enough documentation to know they were about to step into fraud. We did not need a screaming ambush. We needed the room to turn cold around them at the exact moment they expected applause. On the night of the preview, Copper Fig looked beautiful. I will give them that. The old bank in Station North had been transformed with walnut tables, brass sconces, green velvet banquettes, an arrangement of rust-colored ranunculus that I suspected Danielle chose because they looked expensive and uncommon. A trumpet player moved through My Funny Valentine near the bar. The kitchen sent out smoked trout crostini and little bowls of butter beans with charred scallion oil. Wealthy black professionals, arts patrons, and development types drifted through the room in dark coats and careful laughter. It smelled like new paint, citrus peel, and confidence. Danielle spotted me near the back before she saw Nia. Surprise flashed across her face, then annoyance, then charm. She crossed the room with a wine glass in hand. "Malcolm, you came. You said you had a committee thing." "It is a committee thing." Her smile sharpened. "A lot of committees, actually." Xavier appeared beside her, all white chef coat and polished teeth. "Brother, glad you could make it," he said, as if we had ever been brothers. I looked at his hand. It was resting lightly on Danielle's bare back. That small touch made everything plain. "I would not have missed it," I said. Nia entered 5 minutes later in a black dress and long wool coat, carrying a leather folio. The room shifted around her, because striking people often make strangers straighten, without meaning to. Xavier's expression changed first. It was not guilt. It was irritating, the look of a man forced to remember someone else had rights. Danielle set down her glass too carefully. The trumpet player kept playing because musicians know not to stop at the beginning of trouble. Nia came to stand beside me, not touching, just present. "Good turnout," she said, almost pleasantly. Xavier muttered, "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up my paperwork," she said. The first investor service happened quietly. A courier in a charcoal coat approached Xavier with an envelope and asked for a signature. Another approached Danielle. Their faces changed in tandem as they read. Emergency injunction. Notice of contested funds. Forgery allegations. Misrepresentation of ownership. A third envelope went to the equipment rep standing near the bar, who opened it, frowned, and immediately stepped away from Xavier as if physical distance could undo legal exposure. This is what I mean by clean revenge. No shattered glasses. No shouting yet. just a sudden rearranging of who felt safe standing beside whom. One of the museum trustees, a woman Danielle had chased for a year, walked over and asked, "Is there a problem?" The entire room hushed without seeming to. Danielle opened her mouth, probably ready with some smooth explanation about jealous spouses and unfortunate misunderstandings. Before she could start, Nia said, "There's a serious one. This project has been presented using unauthorized financial commitments, forged signatures, and misappropriated marital funds. I thought you should know before anyone writes a check tonight." Danielle turned toward me then, outraged, as if I had violated something sacred by refusing to stay fooled. "You brought her here?" I said, "No, you brought us both here months ago." That was the moment I had to choose whether to stay silent or finally speak plainly. I could have let the documents do all the talking. Part of me wanted that. But Danielle had built her whole strategy on my quiet, on the assumption that if pressed in public, I would retreat into politeness and let her narrate me into the wrong shape. So I said the truest sentence I had. "You used the money my mother left me for a children's art room to help finance the man you were sleeping with." Not loudly, just clearly. In a room like that, clarity travels farther than yelling ever could. Xavier tried first to save himself. That did not surprise me. "Danielle handled investor stuff," he said, hands half raised. I trusted what she said was available. Danielle spun toward him. "Do not do that. Do not stand there and act like you did not ask for every single transfer." He snapped back. "You said your husband never checked anything." There are moments when love dies not with a bang, but with a disgusted silence. Mine had died earlier. There's died there under brass lighting, in front of crab toast and donors, because selfish people are only loyal while things are going well. The investors left first, then the trustee, then the equipment rep, then 2 city people connected to permits. The trumpet player packed up without finishing the set. Within 20 minutes, the room looked less like a launch and more like the morning after a canceled wedding. Danielle stood in the middle of it in her black dress and hard lipstick, breathing too fast. Xavier kept making calls that were clearly not being answered. Nia did not smile. Neither did I. This is another part nobody tells you. Sometimes revenge lands, and all you feel is tired. Vindication has a duller sound than movies promised us. The weeks after were not cinematic. They were administrative, humiliating, and slow. Copper Fig lost backing almost immediately. The equipment company froze delivery. The landlord demanded revised disclosures. Danielle was placed on leave by the museum pending an internal investigation into unauthorized use of donor relationships and expense submissions. My lawyer secured the renovation account and documented the diverted funds. Nia's civil suit over the forged guarantee moved quickly because the paperwork was embarrassingly clear. Church people whispered. My aunt heard 3 versions of the story before lunch one Sunday. Consequences in real life arrive in envelopes and phone calls, not thunder. Danielle moved into a furnished apartment near the harbor with white walls and borrowed furniture. She called at midnight twice the first week, then sent long emails instead. In one, she said she had never meant to hurt me, only to stop living small. In another, she blamed Xavier's influence. In another, she said I had been emotionally absent for years and should not act shocked that she wanted to feel chosen. There was enough truth mixed into the lies to sting. I had been quiet. I had buried myself in work. I had mistaken reliability for intimacy too often. But none of that built her choices. She did that with her own hands. My divorce lawyer warned me that grief can make people generous in stupid ways. He was right. There was a morning in mediation when Danielle looked tired, truly tired, and I almost agreed to terms that would have let her walk away with Parreed and grain untouched. Then I remembered standing in the carriage house with graph paper while she helped sketch shelves for children's art supplies, all while already planning to move the money. Compassion does not require self-erasure. I signed the version that protected the shop. She cried afterward, not softly. I sat in the parking garage for 30 minutes before I could drive. Nia and I met once more in late spring at the Waverly Farmers Market. The tulips were almost gone. Somebody was selling honey in squat jars, and a little boy in rain boots kept tugging his grandmother toward the kettle corn stand. The city smelled like wet brick and cut herbs. Nia had won her case and was moving to Philadelphia for a new position that involved fewer chefs and more sanity. I had reopened the carriage house plan, smaller but honest, with Saturday workshops for neighborhood kids who wanted to paint, frame photographs, or learn to stretch canvas. We hugged goodbye beside a table of collards. Neither of us tried to turn survival into romance. Some bonds are real, without needing to become forever. If this story hit you, remember what really destroyed them was not rage. It was the truth, timing, and consequences. For more original cheating wife revenge stories, betrayal drama, and first-person relationship stories where every choice matters, like this video, share it with another story lover, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. There's always another secret, another lie, and another story worth hearing. What stayed with me in this story was not the reveal at the hotel ballroom or even the collapse at Copper Fig. It was a quieter truth underneath both. Danielle counted on Malcolm's silence, and Xavier counted on Nia's professionalism, because selfish people often mistake decency for weakness. They were wrong. The lesson is not to become ruthless when you are hurt. It is to stop donating your steadiness to people who use it as cover. Malcolm did not heal the night the room went cold. He started healing when he protected the shop, reopened the carriage house dream honestly, and refused to let betrayal decide who he became. The end.